What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and welcome back to another video and another look at some of my top new cards from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Today, we're looking at my top three new green cards that were just printed at the common rarity from this set. So we're going to take a look at what each of these cards do and give kind of a brief analysis of where it could probably fit into existing decks or just its impact on the meta game in general. But before we get any further, if you enjoyed the content that I create, if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate the support. And with that said, let's get into it. Coming in at number 3, I have Patient Naturalist for 2 generic and a green. You get a human scout. When Patient Naturalist enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. Put a land card from among the milled cards into your hand. If you can't, you create a treasure token. It is a 2/3. So definitely at the 2/3 body. That's pretty decent. 3 toughness is generally thought of to be pretty good in the format right now. Is it dodges the majority of the sweepers? Certainly there are some out there like Pestilence or Karat Clan Shaman that will be able to hit 3 toughness creatures, but those don't get played in either many of the red or black decks. Usually they are running different sweepers like, say, End the Festivities or Suffocating Fumes, and there's a few other 2 toughness things out there as well. So it's going to dodge most of that. So that part of it is nice. This is a 3-drop though, so that is kind of why I put it more towards the bottom of the list. As you know, outside of mid-range decks, you don't see a lot of 3-drops in the meta. But you do see a lot of 1 and 2 drops, unless of course that card has an alternate cost that will let you cast it for less than its converted mana cost, or it's, I guess you're calling it mana. We're calling it mana value now. I'm a little old school, so I still say converted mana cost from time to time. But anyhow, nice part about this card as compared to another card that does a very similar thing, I think it's Satyr Wayfinder, is no matter what you mill with this, you will still be up on mana, which is, I think, its selling point is that if you can't get a land, you do get a treasure token, which means you'll still have some mana available. It will only be a temporary fix, but still you will still have some mana available for future turns or for that remaining turn. So that is, I think, pretty nice about the card. The one place I could see this fitting in is possibly in Dredge, though I'm not really confident that Dredge is actually going to want this. It definitely could possibly find a home in there. More likely, I would see this in some type of PDH pile that wants to play out of the graveyard. Possibly that new Rustine card would like that, because that was a new commander that came out for PDH that is also in green and likes to play with things in the graveyard. So possibly could find a home in PDH. I don't think it's quite good enough for constructed popper. I do think as an for an ETB effect, it is pretty nice. It does have a 2/3 body, so that's good. But at the 3 mana cost, like I've said, it's probably not going to be seeing a whole lot of play, though definitely a pretty decent card. And my number 2 card is Tumbleweed Rising for 1 generic and a green. You get a sorcery. Create an XX green elemental creature token where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. You can also plot this card for 2 generic and a green. So this card is kind of a weird one because it's going to fit into some very niche decks. You don't see a ton of decks that are playing really big creatures. There are a few to name. I mean, the Slime Against Humanity deck can create some very, very big creatures, easily making 7/7s or even more, depending on how many slime copies of Slime Against Humanity they're running. So this is a card that could possibly fit into that deck, as well as something like maybe even Monstertron. So I'm not really sure with how tight the Monstertron lists are, since they're basically mono green Tron. Whether or not they would have a room for this, the big downside to this card that I see is plot as a mechanic. I'm not super interested of basically like time walking myself to maybe play something that will have a decent payoff later on in the game, especially because I'm gonna have to time walk myself on turn three. And in my experience, not being able to do something on turn three is generally not that great in this format, as there are a lot of fast decks that can basically decide the game by turn three or four. So unless they're a more interactive kind of mid-range control deck, of course. But so I'm not really sure of this card. I think it does have some power, so I did want to kind of highlight it today. Though it doesn't really seem to have a great home right now. Definitely a very niche card, but definitely could get some decent power on the board, especially for only 2 mana, which there's something to be said for that. My number one new green card from the set is Voracious Varmint. For one generic and a green, you get a Varmint that has Vigilance. You can pay one generic mana, sacrifice the Varmint, and destroy target artifact or enchantment. It is a 2/2. So this card I actually think is pretty damn good. So basically, being a creature and also removal for artifacts and enchantments in one card, I think is really nice. Honestly, I'm kind of liking this a little bit more than what's it? I think it's Troublemaker Oof. That's currently seen a little bit of play in the format. I've been playing Oof in Golgari Gardens, and I've been kind of not liking it very much as like I really have to make sure I either have a token or an artifact at the time that I am casting it, since it has a bargain. And the fact that I might not always have that available sometimes has made the oof a dead card in my hand. However, this doesn't need you to have specific things on the battlefield in order to destroy artifacts or enchantments. Certainly, you're going to have 3 mana in order to do so. But in a deck like Golgari Gardens, for example, having mana available, and especially since it doesn't have to be color specific, except for the one green, you are going to need to be able to have to cast this. I don't really think it's going to be an issue. So being able to destroy artifacts and enchantments, I think, is really good. The fact that it's also a 2/2 vigilance is like, 2/2. The varmint beats are going to be, I think, definitely have a lot of potential, especially with things like the initiative, because you can put a couple +1/+1 counters on this from initiative triggers, and whether it's from the Throne of the Dead 3, or I think is Forge is the first one. So there's definitely something to be said for that, just giving a little beat down from the varmint. Also, it has vigilance, so that's a pretty good. I really like this card. I think it's gonna might see a little bit of play. It's really hard, I think, when it comes to 2 mana artifact and enchantment removal, especially in green. It's really gonna be hard to come close to something like Deglamour, especially since that is at instant speed, and it does something very similar. I mean, this is much more hard removal against them for another mana. So I think it's really hard to compete with something with like Deglamour, but I definitely think this is gonna be an option if people do want to run something that is, you know, not a dead card all the time. If you are on the oof plan, I think this card might actually be better than the oof, though the oof is a enter the battlefield ability, which there's definitely something to be said for enter the battlefield abilities versus activated abilities. Still, I think this card is quite good, and I'm at least excited to try it out. But that's gonna do it for today's video, guys. Let me know what you guys think about the cards that we talked about today. Do you agree, disagree with my assessment of these cards? Are there cards in green that you think should have made the list? Would definitely love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time.